In today's episode of the podcast, I'm getting you up to speed on a new cast on and the only whip I'm reaching for right now, talking a little bit about the yarn, the colorway, the design, and all of my thoughts about where I'm at with that project so far. And spoiler alert, I'm loving it. So if that sounds like just your cup of cozy, get comfortable and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Knitting Podcast. My name is Tayler, and I will be your host. Happy Sunday, everyone. If you are watching this when it goes live, and whenever you happen to be watching this in the future, I hope you are having a fantastic day. It is so good to be here with you guys today. I have just a little bit to share with you, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than usual on this particular project today because it is the only whip I'm reaching for right now. It's kind of pulling me out of a knitting mojo slump, and I'm enjoying every bit of it. But before I get started with that, I do want to give you a couple of updates. As many of you know, I am the owner and dyer of Fiber for the People yarn, and I just had a shop update yesterday, which was Saturday. It is a gorgeous collection of colors inspired by a really moody and rich photo of a spring crocus right before blooming. It's a really beautiful collection of rich and earthy solids. I'll pop a photo up here that has the inspiration photo as well as the colorways featured in the update. You can shop what is remaining from that update over at fiberforthepeople.com. I will link to all of that down below. And the next shop update is coming on July 8th, and it will be inspired by this photo that you see here, and I'm calling the collection Mid-Century. Because I'm pulling this collection from this photo, which is designed with a very mid-century aesthetic, and I'm also really drawn to all the cerulean blue that you see in the photo. I love it, super inspiring. So that is going to be another 4 colorway collection. Each colorway will be a solid color. It's going to be on a 50% superwash merino, 50% cotton base in 2 different weights. That update will be coming on July 8th. Sign up for the Fiber for the People newsletter if you want to stay in the loop, and definitely follow over on Instagram to keep up to date. Also want to let you know that the Wool Needles Hands newsletter is back in business. I had taken a hiatus from that as I was trying to readapt and reformat how I wanted to send out that newsletter to make it a little bit more workable for me. The first issue of this new format went out yesterday, and I'm really loving the format with little bits of cozy creative content each month. So you want to definitely sign up for the newsletter over at woolneedleshands.com. While you're there, you can also check out the merch shop. It's a fantastic way to support the work that I'm doing here at the Wool Needles Hands channel. You can pick up a t-shirt, such as the toe-up t-shirt. There's also a cuff-down version. There's coffee mugs, there's tote bags, lots of fun conversation starters. So definitely head over there and check it out. Now, enough of all of that. Let's go ahead and dive into the one whip that I have been reaching for since we last spoke. Now, in the last, I don't believe it was the last video. It was the road trip knits video. I guess that was the last video. So in the road trip knits video, which was before this one, I shared with you a pattern by Melody Hoffman of Mandarines called Hollows. It's a shawl pattern. And when I was putting that video together and compiling those patterns, that particular pattern stood out to me. Not only, it wasn't new, I had seen it before. It's something I'd had in my favorites for quite some time, but I was rebundling it into the road trip knits bundle because it always draws my eye. It always is one of those patterns that I see it, and every time I see it, I pause and I think, ooh, I would love to have that shawl. It's so scrumptious and lightweight, but very kind of visually interesting with really nice short row structure. It's just a really fantastic pattern. And I love Melody Hoffman. I love the designs that she comes up with. I love watching her vlogs. I love her whole vibe, and I have knit her patterns in the past, and I really love the way that she writes her patterns. And so as I was putting that video together and kind of working through each of those designs, I was noticing that that particular design was starting to pull me out of this knitting mojo slump that I was in. I just kind of felt, as like we were moving into summer, I just kind of felt my knitting mojo wane a little bit, as it does. And that was the one thing that was really kind of just giving me itchy fingers, making me want to cast on, and not only want to cast on for the process, but really want to cast on for the finished object. I am a hockey mom now. My oldest son, who is 8, is now fully in hockey, and my youngest son, who is 5, is in a learn to play program, learn to skate, learn to play program, where he's learning the fundamentals of skating. We are at the hockey rink 4 times a week. And it's cold, but it's also summer. So we don't really wear cold weather clothes on our way to the hockey rink, but when we get inside, it's cold. And so it's nice to have real quick layers to throw on. And somebody had mentioned that having shawls is a fantastic way to provide yourself with quick layers, and you don't have to wear like a heavy sweater or something like that. And so I found not only was this design calling my name because of how visually appealing it is, it was also just pulling my interest because I now have a need for something like that. It becomes a functional part of my wardrobe and not just an accessory that I would wear somewhat occasionally. Functionality is a big one for me. If I find that a particular design is going to serve me and serve a purpose and a function for me, that's a big kicker in terms of if I decide to knit it or not. So all of this is to say that I'm finding not only my knitting mojo, having an uptick right now, but I'm also kind of finding myself turning into a little bit of a shawl person. I look at shawls in my feed a little differently now. They seem a little bit more practical for my lifestyle and the things that I'm doing, especially spending time in a really chilly hockey arena 4 times out of the week. So, okay, that is the project I have here today. It is the one thing that I am reaching for of all the projects I have going on right now. And I don't have a ton going on, but if you watch the podcast, there's some back there that I'm not talking about right now that are just kind of waiting in the wings. And trust me, they're not forgotten. They're just like that, waiting in the wings, because this is at the moment my main squeeze. So this is the Hollows by Melody Hoffman. I've been popping pictures up so you've gotten a good dose of what it looks like. And this is where I'm at so far. Now, guys, I know it doesn't really, I'm going to let that fall to the floor. I know it doesn't look like a ton because it's all bunched up, but I started this. When did I start this? I want to say I started this 3.5 days ago. Not long ago. And I'm telling you, when I sit down, I'm either reading my book or I'm working on this. It's the two things I'm doing when I'm sitting down in this. I've kind of been reading less of my book and doing more of this because I'm just so into it. And I'm really, really loving just all aspects of this design. So this is what I have so far of the Hollows. And I'm going to talk about a few different things here, but I just want to show you where I'm at with this. So it's a really interesting design in that it starts like any asymmetrical, or I don't know, would you call this an asymmetrical shawl design? I'm not very well versed in shawl design verbiage and terminology, but it starts here. And then you begin doing these kind of garter ridges and eyelet sections here as the shawl begins to grow. And then you get to a certain point where you're no longer working across all of the stitches. You're just going to begin working short row sections. And you can see that kind of right here. So this section here of garter stitch is a short row section. It doesn't extend the entire length of the shawl. It just extends a certain portion of the shawl. And I don't know if you can even make that out here. But what I love about that is that once you get to this part of the shawl where you have over 200 stitches on your needles, you get to kind of not have to knit across all of those stitches at one time, because now you're working these short row sections of the shawl. So you get to this big, number of stitches, and now we move to short rows where you're only really working back and forth over like half of those stitches, or, a third of those stitches. So you feel like you're making good progress. You're going back and forth far more frequently. It just gives you that feeling of forward momentum, even though you're only working a small section of the shawl. And I think that all of these little short row sections that make up the shawl are almost going to make the shawl seem like it knits up much more quickly than it maybe actually does. I don't know, but I like having the reprieve from having to knit yourself across 200 and some odd stitches when you can just work across like 90 something stitches and back and forth and back and forth. You complete that section and then you move on to the next short row section, and then 90 some odd stitches back and forth, back and forth. And because you're doing short rows, that number is actually dwindling because you're every time you're going 3 stitches shorter than the previous row. It's a whole thing, and I'm really loving it. I don't know if she designed it with that in mind, thinking like, what a nice way to break up the kind of monotony of knitting across like a couple hundred stitches, like every row. Why not create a shawl that's kind of put together almost like modularly with these short rows, which we talked about Stephen West a couple episodes ago, and I know that that's a thing that Stephen West does an awful lot, and I kind of wonder if that makes those designs kind of fly off the needles faster because you're working almost like in pieces, but not really in pieces as it's all one piece. Am I making any sense? Are you following me here? Because I feel like it's a really ingenious, not only design element, but just construction and execution element as well, something that makes it really enjoyable to work. So I'm loving that. I'm knitting this using Fiber for the People yarn, which is my hand-dyed yarn. And this is from 2 shop updates ago. So not the one that I just launched yesterday, but the one prior to that. This is a colorway called Water. And it's inspired by evening beaches. And actually, it's inspired by one particular photo. So I'll pop the inspiration photo up for that shop update. And I pulled 4 colorways from that. I pulled a colorway that was inspired by the sand, one by the sky, one by the horizon line, and one by the water. And you can see that each of those colorways there kind of pull the hues and tones from each of those portions of the photo. And I thought it was such a beautiful shop update, but I was super drawn to this watercolor because it really pulls out that vibe of sunset or dusk seawater. It's obviously not blue. It's not blue-green. It's very grayish. It's almost like a very muted gray teal. And that's what's like kind of a dusky body of water looks like. It has kind of that real grayish teal hue to it. And I am crazy about this color. It's, like I said, a 50% superwash merino, 50% cotton yarn. It feels fantastic. It has not a rustic toothiness to it, but that toothiness that cotton provides without feeling too dense and too heavy. You have that merino wool in there. It is superwash. It has a nice kind of hand to it there. This is fully washable. I really love this. And I can also tell when I'm working with it, it's not going to be, as warm as it would be if it were all wool because it does have that cotton in there. So it has a really nice lightweight feel to it. It's very pleasant to work with. I'm absolutely loving it. I love the way it took the dye. It's really nice and pastel and muted and so beautiful. And actually this particular yarn, just for future reference, will be returning to the shop on July 8th. Not these colorways, but this yarn base in the colorways inspired by that photo I mentioned in the beginning of the episode. That's inspired by that. It's mid-century colors and mid-century aesthetic. Same yarn base, different colors. So if you would like to try a 50-50 superwash merino cotton blend, July 8th is the time to do it for Fiber for the People. So I love that. I love the color. It seems like to me when I start to work on it, no matter what it is that I'm wearing, it just seems like a color that would go. It would look kind of nice, like, I don't know, paired with lots of different colors. It matches the color of my eyes. I think that looks really cool. Matching your eye color, it's always kind of nice. It gives it a little bit of a, I don't know, it just goes, guys. It goes well. So yeah, look at that. How pretty is this color? And then as it grows and becomes bigger, I could wear it over my shoulders. I could bunch it up even more. Oh, I'm loving this. I'm looking at myself on the screen and I'm just obsessed with this color. This is such a fantastic color. In addition to that, I love the little design elements that make up this particular design. I love Melody Hoffman patterns because I feel like overall, they're very classic, timeless items and pieces that you can wear. They don't have anything really super intricate, but there's little design elements in each of her designs that kind of that set it apart and make it special. So you have some designers that their whole thing is designing very basic, neutral pieces that are your classic go-to wardrobe staples that you can throw on with anything. And I love those designs. I mean, I'm thinking like my favorite things, knitwear, petite knit, Ozetta, all of these kind of come to mind. Melody Hoffman strikes a really lovely balance between designs like that and designs that have a lot more kind of features to them, things that make them stand out. It's not over the top in those features. It's just the right amount to give it a little bit of that nuance while still keeping these designs classic wardrobe staple pieces. I knit her tulip jumper, and it's just this fantastic top-down raglan crew neck jumper. It's so easy to wear, but it has this really lovely scalloped hemline down at the bottom that is kind of, it's prominent, so it's definitely noticeable, but it's not over the top, and it's just the right amount of detail that makes it a really fantastic wearable staple piece, but it sets it apart and gives it nuance. And I know that's a very flowery way to describe how I feel about Melody Hoffman patterns, but I truly do love them. I haven't knit a lot of them, but when I see them, when I look over the patterns, I have a lot of them in my library. When I read through them, I love what she does, and I love her design aesthetic. So that's one of the things about this that I truly love, is it's rather simple in its design nature. I mean, we're talking garter stitch, garter ridges, pretty simple eyelets, but it's the way she's putting all of that together that makes it unique and interesting and fun to knit. But also it's going to be really fun to wear. Another thing that I kind of picked up on with this, and I almost made the mistake of not considering this closer, because we're doing short row sections here, there's going to be points where you have to turn your work. Before you finish an entire row, you turn your work and you work back the other direction. So if you're new to short rows, if you've never executed them before, that's pretty much what it is. Instead of going all the way to the end of the row, you turn your work around and you continue back in the other direction, creating these little short rows that kind of work to create wedge shapes in your pattern. Now, when I started to create the short rows and I got to my first turn, I noticed in the pattern that it just said turn. So that would suggest that you just turn your work and you continue working back the other direction. Now, when I've done short rows in the past, typically I'm doing German short rows or some kind of a short row that would require you to wrap and then turn. And what that means is that stitch right before your turn, you're going to wrap that stitch with your yarn and put it back where it was so that it lessens the gap between the live stitches, that you're going to continue to work when you turn, and the ones that you're leaving behind, if that makes any sense. You do that so you don't have a hole there. And so when I got to that first turn of the first short row section on this pattern, I was thinking, it doesn't say to wrap and turn, and I'm almost wondering if that's because it's assumed that you're going to do that, or if that is very much a separate technique. And so for that first turn, without diving any further, which is very unlike me, usually I research that before continuing, I just decided to wrap and turn. So I wrapped my stitch, I turned, and I went back the other way. And the whole time I'm working my way back the row, I'm thinking, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just turned my work. I know it would have said wrap and turn if she wanted you to wrap and turn. And so I'm making my way back that row, and I decided I'm not going to go back and change it. What I'm going to do is research it, find out, and then I'm going to carry on with whatever I think is the right thing to do. So I looked it up, and it seems like this is something I should know. But there is a big difference between turning and wrapping and turning. When you turn your work and carry on the other direction without wrapping your stitch, you're creating a little bit of an eyelet. Very, very small. Nothing like the eyelets that you see in this section here. Little tiny eyelets, but when they're done at even intervals, they're noticeable. You can discern them, and they look like little design elements. Now, sometimes that is unintentional. Maybe a designer should have included a wrap and turn and chose not to, and now they have a design that has little holes in it. And to remedy that, they would do a wrap and turn instead, so you get a seamless, kind of short row, whatever. I don't think that happens often. I think most designers know which one to use, right? But in this case, and I can tell by looking at the photos of the pattern, and I can also tell by seeing how it's coming together here in my project, that these turns without the wrap are intentional because they're creating these really sweet little delicate eyelets along the edge of the short row. And it's so ingenious. It's just these little subtle details that you pick up on. I think you pick up on them more as you're working the project, and then probably when you're blocking it, you can kind of appreciate all that, because these are things that will be somewhat lost while you're wearing the pattern or the shawl. But in the process, you see that and you think, wow, like how interesting. That is such a nice, subtle design element. And so I learned something from that. I took something away from that. And I did mention this in the issue of the newsletter that went out yesterday. I kind of shared this with you because I think it's something to take forward with you, just in case maybe you would have the same, quandary if you were to confront this in a pattern. So moving forward, I will always know now that if it says to turn, you just turn and you work back the other direction. You don't wrap anything. It might feel kind of funny, but that's what you do. If it says wrap and turn, then you wrap and turn because they want to close those little gaps. They don't want to have little tiny eyelets. It needs to be nice and clean. So something I pulled from this, and I love it. I actually love the choice to just do a turn here. Is that, and I learned something, and so I'm sharing that with you guys. So that I thought was really cool, and it's just another reason that I love Melody Hoffman patterns so much, is she just has these really thoughtful design elements. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to see if you can kind of tell. And again, it's going to be difficult because I just started. So right below my needle cord, you can probably see at an interval these little openings, almost like somebody took a knitting needle and poked little holes in the stitches, right? It's just very subtle, moving up the short rows. Well, as I continue with this section of the shawl, I'll have more fabric on top of those, and those little holes will become a little bit more prominent than they are now, but it's gonna give it a really cool kind of like, I don't know, like stitched look. I don't even know if that's the right word, but I just think it's so interesting. What a cool juxtaposition of these tiny little eyelets that I'm creating here with those turns and these really beefy eyelets that I have right down here. It's so neat. It's so cool because we've got garter ridges here and beefy eyelets here, garter stitch here and little baby eyelets from my turns. And I don't know. I appreciate it so much. Melody Hoffman, I see you. I see what you're doing. And I think it's fantastic. Keep it coming. And this is one of her earlier designs too. I just think it's great. I think it's so cool. I love the design. I'm crazy about working on it. I'm amazed that I've even made this much progress in such a short amount of time. Love this merino cotton blend. Keep your eyes out for the next Fiber for the People shop update. Because I love this yarn. So that is my hollows. It is the whip I am reaching for right now. I just love it so much. Are you finding that there's one whip that's getting you through right now, or that it's the one thing you're finding you want to knit on most? What is your one whip that you're reaching for most right now? Like, I would love to know, are you in a knitting slump? Do you have one thing that's pulling you out of it? Let me know if there's no whip that you're reaching for. Are you having a dry spell? Tell me. I want to know because I think it's interesting. I love sharing that with you guys. And I feel like sometimes when I get on here and I kind of like, not vent, but share how I'm in a knitting slump and I've lost my motivation and these are the things that I'm doing instead because I just can't find and yada, yada, yada. And I analyze why it is that I'm having like a knitting dry spell. I enjoy sharing that with you. And I think it's funny because I think that there are some folks that think that I'm doing that apologetically, and that's missing the point because it's not. I don't know. I enjoy sharing those things with you. I think that's all part of the creative process. I think when you are a creative person, you go through blocks and dry spells and times when you just don't feel the energy to create in a certain way that you were finding lots of energy before, and having a group of people that can relate to that and sharing those frustrations or whatever the emotions are that come with that for you. I think it's really important to have that because of all the people in my actual life personally, of all the people that are going to understand, y'all are going to be the first ones to get it. And so I share that with you guys. So just know moving forward, when I share with you the drama of like a dry spell of my knitting and I start telling you all the things creatively that I'm doing to kind of fill that gap, it's coming from that place of just relatability and wanting to talk to the people in my life that get it. And that's you guys. So I like having that opportunity. And I think that we all should feel comfortable sharing those moments. And so please let me know, let everybody know. So when I say comment, I don't necessarily mean you're only speaking to me. You're speaking to all of the folks who read the comments below and want to be involved in the conversation. So share in the comments, do you lose knitting mojo at certain times of the year? Are you in a slump right now? Are you in like supercharged knitting mojo land right now? Like what's your creative energy at the moment? Where are you motivationally speaking? What are you motivated to make right now? Because I think it's important to be able to share that. And if you're feeling like absolutely no creative motivation, let yourself feel that. Just be in it because it comes back. I promise. Okay, all of that, much ado about all of that. In the past, I have used Ravelry as a place to host knit-alongs and make-alongs and various different conversations, like group conversations surrounding the podcast. I moved away from Ravelry because I was finding that between my email inbox, both for Fiber for the People and Wool Needles Hands, and 2 Instagram accounts, 2 websites now that I host, the channel, it was becoming really difficult to add another thing to what I already had. And Ravelry is not a place that I go to socialize. It's not some place that it's not a social outlet for me. It's more where I go as a database for patterns, sometimes as a place to store the projects I'm working on, but I really am not the greatest at keeping that up. I would like to be better, and that's something for another day. But I do know that so many of you, when it comes to participating in knit-alongs and make-alongs, would like to be able to use Ravelry to submit your work because maybe you're not on social media. And also too, when you submit your finished objects or your works in progress for a particular make-along, you kind of like other people to see it, to be a part of that community, to have conversations about the work that you're working on. I mean, like that's not lost on me. I completely understand that. And when I kind of moved away from Ravelry and started suggesting that when you were participating in make-alongs, you emailed me your finished project, I think I was removing that part of the whole knit-along community that a lot of us really love, and I get that. And so what I would like to do moving forward is, instead of having you email me your make-along projects, we're going to go back to Ravelry, and we're going to have all of our make-alongs over on Ravelry. You can still obviously post on social media using the hashtags, but when it comes to submitting something for a make-along, or being a part of that camaraderie and community surrounding a particular make-along, whether there's a prize or not, I'm going to be doing that on Ravelry. But here's where I need some help. It's hard for me to get on Ravelry as often as I would like, to see all of the work that you're doing and comment regularly. And so I would like to have a moderator for Ravelry. I want to start with just one moderator and then move from there, if we can maybe do 2 or 3 down the road. But I would like to have at least one moderator that I can rely on to just check Ravelry occasionally, answer questions, kind of keep the ball rolling and keep that forward momentum going in between the times that I'm able to get in there and see what you guys have going on. Because of course, if it's a make-along going on, I will be looking at your work because that's how I'm going to share those things here on the channel. But I really want to make sure that there's somebody there to answer questions and various different things like that. So I am looking for a Ravelry moderator. If you are interested, email me, let me know, and I'll kind of go on like a first come, first serve basis. So it's not like I'm going to be picking the best. I'm just first come, first serve basis. If you are into that idea, let me know, shoot me an email, because I would love to have that additional help. And I would love to be able to carry on the community camaraderie aspect of our make-alongs on Ravelry, because I know so many of us already use Ravelry. I've thought about doing like Discord or a Facebook group, but I'm not a Facebook user and I don't want you to have to download another app. If most of us are already using Ravelry. So you get where I'm coming from. So I just wanted to lay that down and let y'all know that that's kind of how we're going to be doing make-alongs moving forward, and any other kind of threads that are associated with the podcast for right now. So keeping you posted on that. Last time I shared the podcast with you guys, I did share some of the finished objects that were coming out of the Something Old, Something New make-along, as well as the Break the Curse make-along. I did not share all of the projects from the Something Old and Something New make-along because I feel like some of them came into my inbox without the hashtag. And so it was hard for me to sort everything out and see everything in one place. So what I'm going to do right now is try my best to share what I have left, the remainder of the projects that were submitted. If your project doesn't pop up here, I apologize. I'm doing my best to filter through all of them and to show them here in a reasonable amount of time. So here are the remaining projects that were submitted to me for the Something Old, Something New make-along. Thank you to everyone who took the time to submit them to me via email. It means a lot to me that you would be willing to do that. And I'm hoping that moving back to Ravelry makes it that much easier for you to share the work that you're working on, have conversations about what you're working on, and have a much easier place to kind of submit those things and know that I see them. And I think it's going to make it a little bit easier for me as well, too. So thank you for listening to me ramble on about that. It was kind of important and I needed to get your input and your help with that. So thank you. And to everybody who participated in that make-along and who is currently participating in the Break the Curse make-along, I appreciate it. I will pop a link up to the video where I introduce the Break the Curse make-along if you would like to jump on board. That is kind of an ongoing make-along right now, so you can learn more about that. All right, that is it for me today, folks. My husband and I are celebrating our 13th wedding anniversary today, so I want to get this finished and edited and up for you guys to enjoy for your Sunday viewing or whenever you happen to be watching this. And as always, if you enjoyed yourself or took anything from this video, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe. Click the bell icon so that you can be notified anytime I upload new content, which is every Wednesday and every Sunday. And until I see you for Wednesday's episode of the Midweek Ramble, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.